I want to ask you for help. Go to the donate page on the website. If you can help, help. If you can't, don't stop coming or attending or listening to these teachings if they're helpful to you. Just do what you can. No requirement. So no selfies. This is the title is, it works a little bit, but it kind of gets your attention somewhat. We all know what a selfie is unless you're still using stupid phones instead of smartphones. While we're on that topic, before I even go into the no selfie, do not use smartphones to time your meditation with. If you want to use them as a clock or as a communication device, do that. Or to watch TikTok or stuff. Be very careful. This is extending through not only Meta or Facebook, but also through Google. They are getting more and more into your mind stream via your communications. Not trying to create paranoia particularly, but it's getting more and more about controlling. So far, we're free, kind of. But are you free in your mind stream? Because if you're totally living in your life stream and you believe what's happening around you and disbelieve other things that are so-called happening around you, and you believe your thought patterns, disbelieve your thought patterns, ignore your thought patterns, you're not free. You're in a prison of your own making. Hopes for this, fear of that. It's a setup. And organizations like Meta, Google, and so on are all about power and control and money and power and control and money. So that doesn't mean we can't use them as a society or communication. By all means, let's do that. I'm in favor of that. I have a smartphone and I use it a lot. And I occasionally take selfies. I'm not against that either. The selfie I'm talking about is that constant in the seventh consciousness. There's the first 5 sense fields. There's the sixth, which is just the thought generating consciousness. Thinking about this, thinking about that. Should I put this over there? No, I better put it over here because of. That's fine. Those are all operating in terms of the relative truth of living in this world. How to set the table, where you left your wristwatch, those kinds of things, thinking. So important. That's what synchronizes all of the sense fields so that it feels like there is only one person here, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking for that matter. But the seventh has been described in the Yogacara tradition as not easy to understand. And I don't claim to understand it, but what I do understand of it, I try to use. And one aspect of the seventh consciousness that is sometimes referred to as the Glacial Mind, or I might have this wrong, you can correct me if you like, klisto-mano-vijñāna, or vijñāna. It's that area of the consciousness that goes like this, yes, or no, or who cares? That's a conclusion, who cares? That also is a tightening fist. So be aware, when I say no selfies, I know you can't stop that necessarily. You can't just go in and stop being self-centered, but you can observe the self-centeredness. You can actually see the way when something happens, the self-referent is just about, it's insanely, it's like a knee jerk. It's like we immediately go to me and how I feel and what I should do and what I shouldn't do. Should I believe that? Should I not believe that? Is that true? Are they talking about me? Up to and including that kind of paranoia. So be aware of that. With a sitting practice of meditation, a lot of mind training, your ability, you could use that word, to actually be aware of your self-centeredness. That's where we start. We don't try to act like we don't have egos, or act like pretend that we're enlightened somehow, that we're no longer have any self-interest. And that could work for a while. You could actually maybe bring that about and convince yourself, maybe convince other people. Perhaps not. The awareness of the grasping, the awareness of the rejection, passion, aggression, ignorance, just the awareness of that without meddling or fooling with it too much. It might take a little bit of relaxation in your mind stream to actually allow yourself to have negative thoughts without doing anything with them. Positive thoughts without doing anything, no cranking them up, trying to get more. Keep it very simple, just receive. Just whatever's showing up in the mind stream, just receive. It may, for a long time, may feel like they're your thoughts, like you actually are thinking. That's a big misunderstanding, and not only big, it's the understanding that there is a separate being called you because there's a body here, because you have hands and arms, legs, face, tongue, body, mind, so on. All of that gets together. The five skandhas: form, feeling, perception, conceptual mind, production of thoughts, and the six sense fields coming back together. Creates an incredible illusion, very convincing. But look at the back of your hand. Where did that come from? Some of you are actually doing that. Not a bad idea. Feels kind of silly. Look at the palm of your hand. One of the teachings, a traditional teaching, because the ones who understood this are trying their best to say that what you're looking for is right in front of you. It may be covered up with all kinds of crap, but what you're looking for is there. It's there. You don't have to look around corners. You don't have to move to Brazil or anywhere. You don't have to go to some other place to find this, to understand this. Find it right in your house, right in your own body, mind. But you might need someone to tell you that or suggest that or recommend that. So what we look at is how much we cover up what is there with selfies. Self-reference, that's one of the four. Self-love, self-reference, self-pride of self, and the one I never can remember. Which one's that?
Self-love?
Might be. Huh?
Self-delusion?
Delusion of self, maybe? No, that could be. So pride of self or self, everything is about you, or everything is about me. Anytime anything happens, I notice that I'm thinking about how that affects me or includes me or doesn't include me, or I think about that. This has not ceased over here. I'm not claiming anything. I can't, because nothing fundamentally has occurred. Difficult to make a statement like that with where you're endeavoring to point at what this is about and realize that to say that might lead to further confusion, because the idea in studying meditation is to become less warlike, to become more calm, to align ourselves more with the truth of the Buddha's Dharma, if you're studying that, which you probably are. But what I am endeavoring to help you with is to see that if you look for results, if you're looking for something to change or be different, then this is not the path of the Dharma. This is not the Buddha's teaching as I understand it. So being aware of the self-centeredness, be aware of the grasping, being aware of your own self-deception. Don't have to get rid of that. Because if you do try to get rid of that relatively, find some way to move that off to the side, get it to get off the stage, it's still there. It's still functioning because you have not dealt with it directly as what it is. And what is it? Unreal. So if you see that it's unreal, then you don't care if the ego is there or not. You don't care if the ego's sitting right in your lap all the time. You see that it's unreal. At the same time you see that it's unreal, that some dynamic, some aspect of your consciousness may still be attached to that. Be concerned with that. Be worried about what people are thinking about you, what you're doing. That may never go away. The worry about that may never go away. But the belief in a solid self, the belief that there is someone real that's me, that is somehow threatened or can advance or get somewhere, that can come apart, may come apart if you look at the way it is constructed. You have to look at the construction, at the imaginary. You have to watch it assemble itself, assemble its little armies, its little skirmishes with otherness. You have to watch that. You can't interfere. We could, but if you interfere too soon, then you get wrapped up in the circularity, and then we're right back to spiritual materialism, trying to get somewhere, trying to use spiritual techniques to advance. There is no movement. There's no advancement. No selfies. And again, as I've already said, when I say that, maybe that just keeps happening anyway, but by saying that, puts a little tension on that, and you may, in your life, in your post-meditation tomorrow, or in your actual sitting practice, shikantaza, may notice that a lot of the thoughts that arise are, what's this common way to say it, self-centered, or about me, what I'm doing, what I like, who I love, who I don't love, how much attention I'm getting, am I being appreciated? This happens to me constantly. People really appreciate what a great teacher I am. Well, tell me. It's not that kind of thought does not arise. I am endeavoring to help you here, my friends, and my enemies, and my neutrals. I'm saying that whatever arises in your mind stream cannot find a self. It cannot find someone who believes this. That doesn't mean that shit won't keep happening. But it's unreal. It's vividly unreal in emptiness, yet there is still form. So when that self-centeredness does happen, the selfie that we're trying to click on or get, it's unreal. So you don't have to get rid of that. When Trungpa Rinpoche said, make friends with yourself, that's what he meant. That's what he was referring to, as far as I understand. The negativity that arises, don't push it away. Don't stomp on it. Don't refuse it. Just receive it. It's just an illusion. If you're at war with yourself, no matter how outrageous some of the thoughts and emotions may come up, if you're at war with that, then you can't really meet anyone where they're at and fundamentally help others, because you'll be at war with them on some level, blaming them possibly. I'd like to have some questions if you have them.
A question from Liam in Marquette. How might the paying homage to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas help one along the path? Bowing.
So those are the archetypes of this particular path, which are you could say they're devices, or they are it's like an ancient technology for how to work with the mind. How are we going to work with this crazy mind? How's that going for you so far, Liam? Everything is fundamentally unreal, but it's still there. So let's use that form. Let's understand. Let's listen to what the Buddhas say, what the Bodhisattvas say, what is being said there down through the centuries. You could say, well, I don't know if Avalokiteshvara was really there. It sounds like somebody invented it. It doesn't matter. Everything's invented. You don't have to necessarily have to snoop around and find the true truth, the really true truth. So we use those archetypes, and this is an empty teaching. It is empty of results. It is empty of conclusion. It is empty, empty, empty of the relative dynamic. It's not that there isn't some of that happening, but the actual path is, from the point of view of ego, is oblivion. But from the point of view of realization, it is freedom. Fundamental, ultimate, complete, total freedom, because there's nothing there. Lots of ways of talking about it. So coming back to your question, we prostrate, we offer to Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig, we offer and make a gesture towards this ultimate human figure. This is what deity yoga is about. It's about a way of locating your wisdom mind, which is there, but it has no form. So we give it a form so that we can address that. And just knowing that it's unreal, that that something is made up, is important. But you're going to do it anyway. Otherwise, the rotation goes right down, the spiral goes down, right down into all through the 6 realms and further, more than likely. You ever heard of Vajra Naraka? Kind of a threatening form of hell. And I'm not saying anybody's condemned to anything, but it can be just miserable and constantly repetitious if we don't somehow find a way to intend to see the truth. And one of the ways to see the truth is have an image right here of a carved Buddha, carved probably in China, well, definitely in China, probably a couple hundred years ago. Here it is. And we need that? No, we don't need it. It's a piece of wood in the shape of a human being that understood something. And what did he understand? That everything is dependently risen, nothing comes from its own side as an individual self, including you guys, or me guys. And also that everything is in a state of dissatisfaction, suffering. And that everything that it shows up is impermanent. And everything that shows up is without a central authority in it, called a self. There's no self. There's no solid being there.
Keep going. It feels like there's always one of those 4 operating. There's always a sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
How can we see that clearly if there isn't really anything to contrast that with?
You've just said it. Just continue to look at it. You've said it. You've said it seems like those are always there. We're always seeing those. That's how it's done. And then to go back to the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas, find a form. We have forms here. We have forms every morning. You've been doing them for years. It might seem like a long time to you, but it's not a long time when you look at how long this consciousness has been. We can't even measure because it has no locality, it has no time span. The consciousness that you think is you, it's been here forever. When I say has been here, I'm just saying, I'm not talking about location, nor am I talking about a section of time. That's the kind of forever we're talking about. And you can discover that, you can uncover that. It's right here. It's like the ancient teaching, it's the Buddha in the palm of your hand. It's just what that means. It's look at the palm of your hand. This is receiving. Receive this. Buddha in the palm of your hand. It's not a historical guy, but it's just the energy and the understanding, the awakening to what this actually is, who you actually are. Just continue. Intend. Prostrate. We've talked about that. The prostration is going to feel pretty meaningless. It might even feel like something is really meaningful and something necessary to do. Do more of them until it starts to open up, because eventually it will. More? Other questions? you show you scratching yourself there, or were you, okay. Okay, that's not a question. He show us scratching his chin. Were you scratching your chin? No. Give me a question. You're going to retreat for 2 weeks, right? Won't you get lonely in there? Why do you want to do such a thing? Don't know? Sounds like a good reason to do that. Go ahead.
Sure. Bowing. When you say what we're looking for, we're looking at.
Yes.
Does what we're looking for have to be aligned with something for that to be true?
No, everything is a cover-up of sorts. I mean, everyone is different. So someone who has no path and nothing at all, or just living day to day, is that how you work? No, just day to day, has no path at all. Then the circles will look more like a straight line. They're going here, they go to college, they get a degree, they get married, they have a family, they plan for retirement. It's a straight line from here to death, which is never really going to come for them. It's not really, people just write that off, say, well, we all have to die someday, I'm good. We just keep going from one relative goal. It can be anything from the goal to get a good job, to get a good retirement, to have a family, and to have a good relationship with your children. And some people live in a kind of a God realm, or they believe so much in what's happening in their life that they ignore the ultimate nature of what this is. Well, further questions in here anywhere? Any questions on Zoom?
Sure. Bowing.
Yes, sir.
When you say no selfies and then you say, that we can't help but do that, if relatively it looks like we have a bit of say-so to not do that, should we practice no selfies?
You probably should. I'd say so. You can do that, but it needs to be without some kind of macho pressure or evaluation. Do the best you can, have an intention there, do it with the intention, and then the part of the awareness is noticing that you still keep going to some kind of self-reference on things. It's awareness that's important, not the accomplishment. So you need to be aware of that. Because it may need to get even worse because of the particular nature of your causes and conditions, or your, you could say, your karmic dynamic of being a human being in the first place, of actually having the kind of karma that brought you onto this path, which we call pretty good karma, or well-favored, free to come here and well-favored enough to see that this might be a good thing to do with your life. That's well-favored. People come here and look at this, and they may continue, but they may not become a monk. They don't have to become a monk. No requirement. Go ahead.
The example that's coming up for me is I notice when I'm going on a long drive, I'll just occasionally look at myself in the mirror. And would a practice be just not looking at myself in the mirror while I drive?
No, it's always about awareness. You're already wearing a robe, so you've made there's the first mistake as a monk. So that you're already noticing what your self-centeredness is like, and that you're probably going to need some help with that. That's why I'm doing this, because I knew I could not do this by myself. I even ignored my second teacher. I actually ignored him, and he was right in front of me. And it's because of my own pride that I did that. I'm so full of myself. I'm still full of myself. It's just that self doesn't have the stability it once had as a being. Go ahead.
What is the practice of no selfies?
Just being aware that you're doing a self-referent. Could be any time. That you're adding on some kind of a commentary onto whatever is happening to you. It's just showing up in the room you're in or showing up in your mind stream, going back to yourself, evaluating yourself, judging yourself. That's a selfie. You're taking little snapshots of yourself as doing pretty good. Little snapshots of yourself as not doing so good because of this, because of that, because I said this, I shouldn't have said that. All of those. Stop it. You probably won't be able to, but by saying stop it, that brings your mind into that area, the degree to which you're pushing and pulling and shutting down through self-reference. It's very subtle. It's like a pride of self is extremely subtle because it just seems like, correct, you are a person who knows stuff and people should listen to you, or you pretty much know more than most people. Like, well, being a Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist, so therefore I understand the nature of reality better than people who don't practice Buddhism. Position.
If it looks like we're able to put some tension on it and not do the selfies, are we probably ignoring that we're still doing that?
No, not necessarily. That's when it becomes your practice. Not necessarily. There might be a way to put some tension on that without it turning into some kind of cover-up or your pride or your self-centeredness or your narcissism. But there's not going to be a standard for it so you can say, oh, now I know how to do it. I got it. Just when this happens, then do that. If that happens, do this. It's not that there aren't all kinds of practices that are set up that way, because everybody's functioning in a different way with these teachings, just like Atisha's 7 points of mind training and those 59 slogans. Some of them are very, very, do this, if this happens, do that. And sometimes we need that. Some people need that. You look at those slogans, it's almost like they're written by half a dozen different people rather than just one person, because the quality of it shows up in so many different ways. Sure.
If we're criticizing others or complimenting others, is that still a way of being self-centered?
Well, the way in which you bring up the question is telling me that there's some frequency or something that's happening in that area for you. It may be for you. I wouldn't say that I could just make a statement that it was. But perhaps complimenting others because makes you feel good. And if other people are grateful for your compliment, oh, thanks. Most people don't notice that, but thank you for saying that. Complimenting something for how helpful they are. It's a very interesting area. The way we would work with that, or I would say, is just look at the intention. When you're going to compliment somebody, look at your intention. What's in that for you? Is there a you there that's trying to get something out of that? Be the person who's complimentary. Be the nice, easygoing person who's complimentary. And when you criticize, if you're saying it right to that person, what's the intention there? And you being the Eno right now, are you still the Eno? Well, I can't say that. How did you graduate from Enohood? You went into retreat. That's how you did it. No, so if you have a function here in the monastery, then there may be times where you might have to be critical of somebody, come up to somebody and say, when you do this or this, then you don't do the form in this way. Do it in this way. So you might have to do that occasionally, which is somewhat critical. But if someone's in the monastery, especially if they live here, they've already agreed to live under these forms to fundamentally help people train their minds. Is that the kind of thing, or are you thinking about something else?
Yeah, that was helpful. Also curious about if criticism doesn't go outward, just mental chatter about criticizing what other people are doing. Or
Just aware. Don't shut it down, because that's how you're going to train your mind, is you're no longer going to fight with anything, especially your own stupid, crazy mind. It might say, here I go again thinking that. You just stop being so critical of her or him. So no, just be aware of the criticism, but don't necessarily, as I sometimes say, hook up the vocal cords or your musculature and don't do anything. Don't let it go beyond the first reception of it. That first reception is what? Just chatter. Just your mind showing up. Just receive it. Anyone else have a question here in the sender? Anyone online on Zoom? Have a few more minutes left. Quite a few more minutes, actually. If we stay here for an hour.
Isaac bowing.
Go ahead, sir.
How is an overly active imagination a selfie bowing?
It may not be. If it only becomes a selfie if there's some kind of grasping at it or trying to stop it, or trying to enhance it or validate it or verify it. I have a right to think this situation, or this is very creative of me, I should be able to do this. Self-validation of some kind, it could be involved in that. But just observing, if you really listen to these teachings, if you're just going to observe, then I teach this a little bit differently than some people do, and I teach it differently than I was taught, because I eventually had to look at what was in front of me and not what I thought was in front of me. So therefore I say, if you're sitting still and you're sitting in a symmetrical posture without being rigid, and your imagination is going wild with all kinds of fantasies and daydreams about anything, just observe. Just observe. There's nothing to fix, but there's a hell of a lot to see. And some people might sit down and not have much happen. That's also completely valid. Everyone's karma, everyone's wiring, I like to use that image, is different. And that's why you can't do it with a standard. It has to be done with your particular karma arising so that you can realize your true nature. And if there's a true teacher near you, then that true teacher will not interfere with your karma and get you to mind them or obey them, or for that matter, worship them or prostrate to them at all. You may need to do that, but that's up to you. That's up to you. I'll say that one more time. That's up to you. More? Isaac?
Isaac bowing. So it seems I'm kind of overall rejecting that imagination. So just observe the rejection.
Yes. Yeah, good one. Because the imagination is coming up, and then the rejection part is dependent arisen. Might feel like you're doing it, but you aren't. So just observe, keep back up 1/4 of an inch from everything if you can. Use that image so that you can actually see with some kind of, it's not exactly objectivity, but with a quality of just receiving, welcoming what shows up in the mind stream so that you can see fundamentally what it is. That way the path opens up for you. What is the path? The path of the Dharma.
Isaac bowing. I can't really find a location on the rejection, even though I see that I'm rejecting it. Is after I break through the imagination, is the rejection right after that bowing?
Not finding location is the location. So, in other words, looking for something else, whatever shows up, it's like for you, the way you just described it, is not finding the location. That's the location. That is closer to the ultimate nature of what is arising than some kind of location in the mind stream or in your thinking process or at the beginning of your thought patterns, the ending or the middle. So that's finding it. That's why it's necessary to have a teacher, so that teacher can listen to you and respond to you in a way that won't cause you to go in further circles. It also may not clarify things for you, because the clarity is about you, about your mind. You need to do it. You need to see this. And if you continue, you will. What was it?
You say it's not about obeying or don't do what you're told. What you're told is
Don't do what you're
something
told. Yes, I say that.
If the teacher or the forms or the sangha seem to be asking for something we feel like we can't do, how do we work with that?
Are they asking for that?
Probably not right now. Seems like a good time to ask when it's not
Yeah.
happening.
Well, I would say just look at it. It's probably, the ego mind has a lot of spin-offs that look like the truth. And and some of them are so incredibly powerful that, people take their lives because of those things. And people hurt other people because of the spin-off of ego that it comes up with a big, huge jellyfish of suffering and pain that is caused by that. And then suddenly we find ourselves doing harm to ourselves or to others because we believe those feelings and those thoughts. And they're unreal. They're intense, they seem solid, and it is an incredible illusion. Just keep going, just keep practicing this particular situation you're in, living in a monastery or near a monastery, you're a few blocks away, you practice here every day, just continue to do that. Don't go anywhere else, stay here, continue to practice, continue. Intend. More. Well, you notice that doesn't last. I said, well, this is a good time because it's not happening. Well, that tells you a little bit right there that when it is happening, it seems so incredibly real and solid. And then you notice that the day later, or 2 days later, that was really intense. And now it's not here. And then 3 days later on, then something, this happens, that happens, or this moves and that moves, and you're back into a very similar kind of intense kind of anger at the sangha, or anger at the teacher, or just anger at yourself for not being able to align yourself with what's happening here. Sound familiar? Did I miss it?
I'm not sure what it is. I just afraid to say no.
Or just say no to who? Did I tell you to do something that what have I told you to do that you can't say no to?
Sokuzan, nothing. It was just when you said it's not about obeying, it just showed up that way for me.
Oh, well, that's not. Other people teach this differently. I don't teach anything like either one of my teachers. Well, I wouldn't even know how to do that. I teach out of what I'm looking at 24/7. I'm always looking at it. I don't know anything. All the knowledge I thought I was collecting is just all gone to hell, or wherever. I know wherever it went. But if I say something, it sounds like I'm knowledgeable or erudite or something like that. No, that's not true. So don't do what you're told. But don't let me catch you disobeying me. No, I mean that. Don't do what you're told. Really, if someone tells you something, you can consider what they've said. But don't do it just because the teacher said that to you. And if you haven't noticed, I rarely say, we've set up this form and this is the form. You want to live here, then you're going to do a lot of things that the form tells you to do. And I'm part of setting this up along with other people here. But I'm not particularly giving direct orders to anybody, other than train your mind, and here's how you can do it. Well, yeah, and I see Eric out there still safely ensconced in his bedroom. Those days are fast coming to an end. Yeah, probably you guys know, or I should say not probably, but probably, I miss that middle vowel, or not, is It's not a vowel, yeah, it's a vowel, isn't it? Yeah, someone from Australia has to tell me that.
That's because we talk correct down there.
I thought you were from England.
Both.
You're there from both. That's why you have such a split personality?
Yeah, now I'm here, so I'm totally
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yes. Anyway, Eric will be here tomorrow evening, is it? No, Friday evening. Yes, that's right. Okay. Well, we've got your cell all cleaned up for you. Any further questions from anybody out there? Kozan, do you have any questions? Come on.
Brian bowing.
Go ahead, Brian.
Kozan, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kozan. He's inviting you to step into it. Go ahead.
Goes on by. Earlier, you talked about using the teachings of Atisha points of mind
Yeah.
training. And there's one that you refer to sometimes. It says, change your attitude and relax as it is.
Yes. I do.
And we're observing choicelessness. So how would you even as a crutch, change your attitude on purpose?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And that, because that is so definite, will change your attitude and relax as it is. And people might say, good luck, I can't do that. So I have seen people, that's worked a little bit for me in past times, not extremely well, but a little bit. But some people, it seems to be a very good way to work with the mind. And I think sometimes if a person's mind wobbles a lot. In other words, my fixation is extremely, it's like a clenched fist. You know, you change my attitude, yeah, give it a shot, see if you can change my attitude. So I'm just saying I am, insofar as there's a personal self, that personal self shows up, sometimes it tightens right up. It comes and goes. It's unreal. I know it's unreal all the time, but sometimes it just gets really strong. Not very often these days. It still happens, not much. But Unyo, do you mind if I mention you? So Unyo is somebody who is a lot more, she's more of a pushover than I am. And so I'm just saying she vacillates, or is more, what is the word, mutable, more movable. So if she gets locked down on something, sometimes that slogan, not all the time, there's no guarantee, sometimes that slogan just blows the whole thing apart. And something where her emotions had been tight as a fist for maybe hours, maybe a whole day, the whole thing just falls apart. And there, as I recall you saying, paraphrase you a little bit, there's really no residue. Isn't that true? Would you want to say anything about that or no?
I don't know how that works.
I don't either, but sometimes
it doesn't.
sometimes it doesn't. So take all those slogans, and some of those are so incredibly almost mechanically abstract and conceptual that like what is the, maybe you remember that one, the slogan about the supreme shunyata protection, the four kayas. And it's such a conceptual, it has some import to it when you contemplate it, but it's like, it's really conceptual. Whereas then there's a lot of other ones in there, the 59 slogans that are more fluid, like remain a child of illusion, one of those. And that's something if you can use that, you can just reflect that, and all you're really saying to yourself is, this is unreal. It's here, it's solid. You can tap on it, you can push on it, but to actually realize this is actually a dream, that we totally abandon this world and sometimes even our name and our identity and everything when we go to sleep, and we enter another world that is full of all kinds of activity that, and if you remember your dreams at all, you'll see what a contrast it is. And if you're not remembering your dreams at all, I highly recommend you start recording them. So if you can do that for a year or two, then you'll start remembering dreams. You won't have to continue to write them down. Keep a dream book. Every morning, get up and write down the date and say either no dreams or I can't remember the dreams. And if you do that, eventually that will break through and you'll start writing dreams down, as far as I can see, as far as my own experience and others that I've worked with doing that. Further, goes on.
Bowing. That one came up to mind earlier today because Sally was talking about astrology, and I'm a Leo sun and a Taurus moon, and she said, "Oh, those are both fixed signs." I don't know if that means stubbornness. I don't know if I don't know much about astrology, but if you find yourself stuck on something, and you see the ridiculousness of it, is there a way to kind of boom, knock that out of the...
I've never heard of that sound, poop, but I don't know, I just might not have been around. I don't know. What do you think, Taco Dough? Oh, he wasn't listening. I think the fixed part is just about observing it. The people who are blessed with fixation are extremely dependable. People who are cursed with fixation are extremely dependable. And it's dependable that they will not only do what they say they're going to do, but it's very dependable that they will hold on to anything they grasp onto. They're probably going to hold on to that. I'm not going to go into astrology here, but I also have a lot of fixity. Whereas someone like Unyo is very mutable, changeable, fluctuating. Just different styles. You could also go into the Buddha families, which explain a little bit the way people function differently relative to their karma, relative to causes and conditions. Not something you need to believe in. It's just something that has to do with cycles. Very interesting area. Even though Carl Sagan poo-pooed the whole thing, but if you notice, he poo-pooed it without investigating it, which is not very good for a scientist to do that. It's just to look at it and say, well, that's just that's a circle of animals. I'm not going to do with that. So he never bothered to look at it. He missed quite a bit by not doing that. Further question, as long as it's not about astrology. Yes.
Question from Adriana.
Yes.
What is the feeling of nameless or unidentified sadness I sometimes feel?
Mm-hmm. So to go directly to that, I would say the first noble truth is life is suffering. And so, and that form of suffering is not something you want to cover up with some kind of a name or an explanation. Just receive that sadness. Trungpa Rinpoche referred to that as the heart of genuine sadness. So he wasn't necessarily saying it's okay to be sad, or wasn't getting philosophical about it, but just that is the leading edge of suffering, sadness. Samsara is very difficult, and a lot of the sadness that is here is you don't really want to know what it is, because it would be overwhelming. It would knock you off your feet, knock you right down the mountainside, because the suffering is that intense. Just add up the suffering of 15 people you know, and their suffering. So you have one big bunch of that suffering all at once. So this heart of genuine sadness protects you from the ultimate sadness. As long as there's a self, as long as there's an ego here, you're not ready to handle that kind of sadness yet. So you just receive that. You're practicing. You're actually practicing seeing what the Buddha was talking about. The Buddha looked at this and taught. Further questions? Yes.
A question from Joe in Grand Rapids. If we can't trust our phones as a timer, how or why should we trust health officials who we find out were wrong and government officials who lie?
Well, I wouldn't trust anybody because of the immediacy social media and everything. He doesn't have time to go through any kind of a truth screener. Not that that always worked, but now immediately somebody can go right online. I can do it. You can do it. Anybody can go on and just lie. And it's, as long as you're using some of the memes that are out there, as long as you're using some of that material, people will pick it up because they're totally about not looking at their mind. They'd rather look at this world out here. And as the Dogen Zenji said in the 13th century, go out towards the world. This is delusion. Go back toward when things come towards you, rather than you go out towards them. When everything is just received, then this is awakening. But these people are going out towards and spreading things and saying things and with no basis. Even the person who Chazon just got a long dithyram from by an email from a person wasn't a student here particularly, but was having difficulty and came here quite a bit and practiced with us. And he got some heavy criticism from this person about the way we were studying and the way we were, this is a former student of Trungpa Rinpoche. So it's just, people want to fight. They want to blame. They have difficulty. How do you cover up fear? Blame somebody for it. How do you, any emotion you have, you should receive that emotion. Receive it. If you leave how you feel for somebody who caused something, even if they did look at you cross-eyed or take exception to what you said or ignore you or do anything, and it triggers emotion in you that you've been successful at ignoring, and you're just doing just fine, and they come along and do this, and suddenly you're mad at them. Mad. And you self-validate it. Selfie after selfie after selfie of me and how I'm valid, I'm justified in doing this. Have you noticed? You got a few nods, a few people nodding off. So people tend to cover up their fear, their suffering, with various forms of aggression or passion, blaming, explaining, evaluating, judging, or ignorance, just distracting oneself from a situation, or just disconnecting from somebody who triggers you too much, instead of seeing that as a teaching. I'm going to deliberately trigger you if you get close to me, so keep your distance. I notice you're all doing that. There's still only a dozen people live here. Is there a, yes, there is. Spool string?
No. Your son Austin has a question.
Austin, who invited you? I'll have your brother answer it. What's his question?
How do you disrupt this unending cycle?
You start by seeing that it's a cycle. You start by just seeing that it's cyclic, it's circularity. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to disrupt it. Sometimes it's called cutting through spiritual materialism, but it's not actually a cutting. We might need to use that term so that the person who is endeavoring to get some help can relate to that image of cutting, just like the sword of Manjushri. It's a symbolic sword. It has two sharp blades. One blade cuts through self. There is no self. The other blade cuts through other. There is no other. Empty of other, empty of self. This is realization. If this occurs in your understanding, your mind stream, experience, however you want to use it, you're no longer at war with anything. You're no longer at peace with anything. You're no longer ignoring anything. At least with any deliberation that is generated by fear or hope for something better, fear of something worse. If I could say it more clearly, I would. Thank you for the question, Austin.
Goodbye.
Yes.
You were just mentioning disconnecting from somebody that triggers you too much.
Yes.
Are you, is there a time to disconnect from somebody that is just work, seems like work there?
Oh, yes, very much so. But just be aware that that have some responsibility of it for yourself, rather than just putting it all on that person that triggered it. So it's still there. It's just you just got the trigger out of the way. So whatever they were triggering is gone. Could have gone dormant for a while until the next situation, person, event, whether generated in the world or in your own mind stream, because they're not really all that separate, starts to trigger that again. So if you can receive it as a teaching, then it will take on its own dynamic that you might not even have to ask me about. You would just see that you need to relate to that more because it's choiceless, or you need to relate to that less because it's choiceless. If you're doing either or, don't do anything. You're trying to figure out what to do next. It's like, it's not, it's like this, but it's not the same thing, but it's like, you ever been in love? Yeah, choiceless, isn't it? You don't make a choice about that. It's just the case. You don't make, even though it might, all the causes and conditions around it might seem really difficult to work with. You just do it. You have to do it. Same thing. It could be the same thing with someone who is triggering you. You just have to go another direction. So I'm trying to think of an example. I hesitate to give personal examples, but when I understood when Trungpa Rinpoche was telling me as a teacher back in 1973, I realized that I was going to have to start, and he didn't say this, it's just my understanding, I was going to have to start receiving my life as it showed up, not go somewhere else to get some better situation. And that was very, very difficult, because that meant I had to, whatever relationship showed up, that's the relationship I was in. And I never ended any of them. Go ahead.
Could it show up as kind of a credential to just be with things that are just warfare, though? Yes,
it could show up as a credential. But even you could still just observe that. That doesn't mean that you need to make sure that things don't have credentials. That might be an area where it might be a passage that you might need to go through. So less is better. Don't do anything unless you have to. Another word for patience. Another way of working with patience. More?
So I guess it's just sounding like you're saying no matter how toxic a situation is, you should just be with it and learn what you can from it or something. I guess that's what I'm hearing.
Well, to some extent, I'm saying that there's kind of a general idea, but if it's really, really like, stepping in acid, if it's that painful, then don't do that.
What if it's disrupting your life, your ability to function?
Yeah, probably should bow out of that one. But you can do it respectfully, to whether it's your job or your relationship or even your parents. Parents tend to do a lot of meddling based on their fear, based on they'll try to use you as the reason they're not happy. I'm not saying that's happening with you, but so it's about being very aware of what it is rather than manipulating it. Well, okay. Take a final question before we close, if there is one. If not, we can also just close. Must be a question somewhere between Wulong and Kevin. No?
Kevin Bowing. I'm wondering, off the cushion, for people who maybe feel aspects of their relative personality are not respected or acknowledged by the world in general. that can feel painful, but it's also another way of like self-centering. How do we work with respecting how we're showing up relatively without fixating, bowing?
Again, I'm sure you're not surprised by what I'm going to say. Just watch the fixation. Watch the closing down on things. The fixation will feel safer because you're protecting something by closing down on fixation. So just allow that to bleed. I don't mean to use that negative kind of image, but allow that to do what it needs to do rather than covering it up or fixating on it. But if you find yourself fixating, then it's the awareness of that choicelessness of that fixating. It's always, as you've heard me say 1,500 times, always about awareness, not about what happens in the awareness. If it's about what happens in the awareness, we're right back to trying to manipulate and control and do the right practice and find the right way to handle this kind of negativity or that kind of negativity. Follow me a little bit, or do I need to go to the next person?
Kevin, yes, I do follow you. I'm sure there's no protocol here, but in a made up example, for example, with pronouns, sometimes people would like particular pronouns to be used, and
Yes.
the others just might not receive that.
Yes.
So would that be kind of like apologize once and then just leave it at that? Bowing?
We aren't going to be able to treat everybody exactly. Some people are doing everything they can to get a particular kind of treatment, including change their sexual orientation. I'm not against that. People should do whatever they feel like they need to do. They should live their life, and that may be what that involves. And I would be supportive of anyone who's doing that. But to try to get you to try to treat them differently, I mean, you can call them by whatever name, but when you start getting into manipulating pronouns, I mean, come on. It's not that there isn't something to that somewhere, and I would respect it, but the demand is what I'm having trouble with. I demand that you call me Roshi. I demand that you call me whatever. I demand, I need the respect for my choices and my whatever it is. After I've said that, I would also go into it's situational. If you're relating to a person and that seems to you that's a very sensitive area for them, and it might be more helpful at that time rather than set up a standard, to actually be respectful of that and try to use that as much as you can. And when you miss it or something like that, as you were kind of saying there, you could just apologize. Whoops, it's hard for me to remember that. And if they continue to keep asserting that, you might look at your connection with them and what it is their intention is or what they're after from you. Because if they're all about trying to get you to align with their idea of themselves and support them, it's just a I have to use this word, just manipulation of other people so that you don't have to face your own karma. I'm not here to start a fight with anybody, so I'm just saying that you might want to just look at the motivation, the intention for what you're doing and what they're doing. And I don't know, sometimes we see right on here that people, I don't see anybody here that will put on there, what are the different ways of, I don't know, they, them, and that kind of thing like that. I'd say if you want to do that, then that's fine to do that. But when you start demanding everyone does that with you, then it's getting a little bit suspicious from the point of view of trying to manipulate others so you don't have to work with your mind stream in the way it shows up in the world. Just a suggestion.
Kevin, bowing.
Yes, sir.
And yet, without getting into a whole bale of yarn.
But don't get into a hole.
don't get into a hole of yarn. From the point of view of, or not a point of view, but from dependent origination, someone may well be navigating the kind of ambiguity of these pronouns, or what is being heaped upon, what the associations heaped upon them by what is conferred in those
Yes,
words.
very much so.
And, you know, I myself have felt a little ambivalent about what it means to be a man. I mean, it's sort of like a joke, but
Yeah.
if I felt that I needed, if from my point of view, if I decided, well, I just don't want to associate particularly with that, and I asked somebody to acknowledge that in my pronouns, and if they were, this is all very hypothetical, you know, not out of malice or being digging their feet in, but if they were unable to do that, and it continued to bring up this sort of aversion in me,
Yes.
is it something that I would change my attitude and relax as it is?
Well, I follow you, and it could be, and that's why I say, well, don't set up a standard. I'm not setting up any standards if I can help it about that, but you still can't help but see that somebody's trying to get you to function a way that aligns itself in such a way, just using language alone, you know, and this is why we changed the name. This is why you're going to receive a Dharma name at some point if you ever get here again. And I was thinking, I can tell you one of the names I came up with I thought might be helpful, but then I changed it to something. I was going to call you Fragrant Persimmon. No, I wasn't gonna call you that. I just thought of that a minute ago when you started mentioning that you might be sensitive about that. I thought, well, that would be guy to go the opposite direction of the masculine kind of macho stuff. But no, actually, you have does he have a pretty masculine name? I can't remember. Have I told anybody what Kevin Townley's name is? No, the only person that knows that is Jason, and he's not talking. No, so I think it's not to spend much more time on it, but just to say it's so situational that if you've actually spent some time looking at your own mind stream and what you're dealing with your life and what it's been like for you and how difficult other people must have it, you might be able to get off dead center and respect someone's desire to have these personal pronouns and so on function in a certain way. You can do that, but sometimes you might have to be reminded quite a bit, because it's not something that, since we might not share that kind of dynamic, it might be difficult to go into that. So it's also difficult or challenging at least, to have someone have a complete sex change and then suddenly start showing up as the other dynamic, to put it politely. And sometimes it takes a little time to do that. I'm all about endeavoring to do that if someone changes it. We've had a few people in our Sangha do some of that kind of work. I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I'm certainly not going to ignore it. And if somebody needs to go that direction, seems like the whole society is going through all kinds of crazy loops and so on. And that's probably one of them that at some point won't be crazy at all. It'll just be something that someone needs to do with their sexual orientation. Okay, the one last person that I have missed, I think Brian Perry, I think you had a question earlier. Do you still have it, or would you like to just?
No, I think maybe we should close.
Oh, okay, well, all right. If I'd known it was that easy, I'd have left it up to you a long time. Okay, we're going to close. Here we go.